And one of and this meeting is being recorded. But one of which was to hire the executive director role. And there are a lot of lessons from that strategic plan that we will be sharing out for transparency and for folks to know what the organization is focused on and where the organization is headed. Coupled with that is the organization is doing a website rebrand. We really want to make sure that the resources and events from RIDC as well as from you all are more accessible. And so we'll be doing that this summer. And so stay tuned for that. And lastly, we know that there will be questions, comments, divine inspiration from today's session with Jovan. If it's new to you, we do have an online RIDC online community via the Circle platform. I'll drop that link in the chat. Please feel free to continue the conversation there with the other fellow attendees. And so again, Kiara Smalls, I look forward to connecting with you, and please enjoy this workshop we have for you today. And I'll pass it back to you, Allison.
Sweet. All right. So we are here for internal look at external presence, talent attraction with Jovan Hollins. If you were part of the RIDC for the past year, then you know Jovan. He's spoken to us before. This is going to be a 75-minute interactive presentation, which means that you can drop questions, comments in the chat, and then followed by 15 minutes of questions. That being said, I want to make sure that everybody feels comfortable, right? It's a long time, 90 minutes. So if you need to go do something else, if you need to turn off your screen, again, this is being recorded so you can always revisit it later. Jovan is the chair of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, who helps his organization to develop processes and strategic plans to align DEI mission and vision to the organization's overarching strategic plan. Before starting his development consulting firm, Jovan worked for 2 years as vice president of operations for the largest privately held home health organization. He is a friend to RIDC, and we are excited to have you back. Welcome, Jovan.
Thank you so much. So happy to be back, and welcome, Kiara. I think this is awesome. You're really building out your team. You're really putting some intentionality around this. There will be actually a slight shout out to you all in my presentation. So I look forward to connecting today. And without any further ado, are we ready? Awesome.
Let's do it.
Go ahead. All right, an internal look at external presence. As they all said, you know, be sure to just be comfortable. We'll have some time together today to engage and to connect. As we saw previously with Allison, just bring your whole self here. It is okay if there are kids in the background or cats walking across laps. That is not a problem. The important part is that you're able to bring your whole self, and we'll talk a little bit about belonging as it pertains to that in a few minutes. For me, I always want to make sure that I acknowledge the land that I'm on. I'm on the Luiseno and Kumyai land here in Southern California, San Diego to be specific. And there is a website down there that if you would like to know the land that you're on and be able to acknowledge it moving forward, it is there. As we see, hiring and retention are two bookends of a diverse workforce, right? But it's two bookends of any workforce or any participation or any relationship, right? It's the attraction of talent, the attraction of the intended audience, and the ability to retain them. Our inability to connect and retain generally is the issue in this bookend. I want to talk to you a little bit about our learning objectives today. So it's looking internally first, right? The self and organizational awareness. I've done part of this presentation previously, bits and pieces, but some of this still it really holds true. There are no universal truths, but one of those potentially could be is always starting with the self, right? And when you get on the airplane, oxygen mask comes down, you work on yourself first before you help your children or any other dependent that you may support. You want to look internally first. There's an old proverb that says one cannot pour from an empty cup. Also, this aligns itself here. We must look internally first. We can do all of the strategic and tactical things that we need to do. It is not likely it will be done in earnest. So those who are looking for it in earnest will not be attracted. And then if it happens to work, if the strategy or the skill that I teach you happens to work, your ability to retain folks will not be sustainable due to the fact that we haven't done the internal work. right? So we'll do the internal work, talk a little bit about that. We'll go to the external presence, right? What do you look like online and from job description? And then mitigating bias in the interview process. Some skill work, right? So we'll do some internal work and then we'll do some skill work. So for me, I work from Pillars of Social Justice. I have adopted this from Dr. Daryl Wing Su. He is most known for microaggressions, but he's really created a framework for social justice. Today, most of what we'll talk about is awareness. And in awareness, we ask ourselves, in what ways am I contributing to the inequity? What can I do differently? Or what can I change about myself in order to make a difference, right? Knowledge is reaching out, finding out about others, your circle of influence, skills, is what can I do differently to honor differences, right? So a little bit more tactical things, and action and advocacy is a bit advanced as we start to look at what do we need to do to really institutionalize change? What can we really do to thwart systems of oppression? Start off with awareness, right? As I previously said, this is an internal look. So awareness is an active process of becoming aware of our own assumptions about human behavior, values, biases, and preconceived notions, right? Where do we stand? What is our constitution as it pertains around this, right? Not looking across the aisle to say, oh, that was, inappropriate, which it likely could have been, but what can we do first internally to create change? That old saying, if it is to be, it is up to me, resonates here. And you're looking at awareness, right? If you don't have a sound awareness strategy or a sound understanding of your own biases, implicit bias will show up. It is, I do a workshop on this, one of my favorite workshops, one of the more difficult workshops, right? Because we are talking about things that are internal to folks, things that, as we see in a few moments, may not even be known to them. So implicit bias involves associations outside of conscious awareness that lead to a negative perception of a person on the basis of irrelevant characteristics, like their race, gender, or age, right? Those things are generally irrelevant when it pertains to the relationships you're building or work being done, or the support that you're giving. Implicit bias is one of the key tenets as it pertains to really building awareness. And with implicit bias, there would be blind spots. Implicit bias creates blind spots, like I said, but blind spots impact people. Love this book on blind spot. If you have not read it or listened to it, I would highly suggest it. A couple others I'll show a couple others in a few moments, but really, really a great book, right? And just some steps to it, right? Some of the unintended consequences of implicit bias is the way you make others feel, right? So where it says one's reputation, whether false or true, cannot be hammered into one's head without doing something to one's character, right? You may not know that you are actually the one wielding the hammer. When it comes to implicit bias, the threat will come at the worst time. In the most pressured situations, when they're at greater risk of confirming the stereotype about his or her group's abilities, implicit bias will show up. It is behind the scenes. It is something that is subconscious to you, right? And it is likely to avail when you least expect it, or probably at the worst time. The other thing about implicit bias is you have to do the work. You have to do the work for implicit bias to bring that to light, to not be on autopilot. To state the unstated is one of the most important things about implicit bias. Implicit bias does not get better as time goes, and it will not get better by hiding from it. This one is one of the ones where we have to do the work. Diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. There's a lot of different reasons. There's a lot of different models for this. This is one that we use from one of our colleagues. So diversity is multiple identities represented in an organization. Inclusion is thoughts, ideas, and perspectives of all individuals matter. Equity, constantly and consistently recognizing and redistributing power. Here's the issue. If you don't have diversity, the dominant group or ideology is deferred to for decision-making, opportunities, and promotion, right? So if there's no diverse voices in the room, the dominant group will dominate. as it pertains to equity. Culture and assimilation results in disengagement and low retention. If there is no equity in the room, or if there's no equity opportunities, you are forcing folks to assimilate to the current culture, and they will likely disengage or they will likely leave. Equity is one of the most important tenets as we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. As you see, belongings where all circles, they align or they all intersect. But here's what happens if you don't have inclusion. The oversaturation of similarity and homogeneous culture and simplified points of view. If those thoughts and ideas and perspectives are not shown that they matter, then those who have the similarity, you will create an echo chamber to some degree, right? But ultimately, you want to get to a place where belonging is there, an organization that engages full potential of the individual, where innovation thrives and views, beliefs, and values are integrated. In belonging, you will have ownership. In belonging, you will have the greatest amount of engagement from your team, from your partnerships. Belonging is where these, I guess, these Pareto circles all intersect, and that is the ultimate goal: engagement and ownership. And we say all that to say, all right, this is obviously this cartoon is jocular, but everybody wants change. They recognize change is needed, and they all say, you know, we want it. Then it gets a little quieter about who wants to change, right? Because that goes into some of what we're talking about, some of that awareness. Things will have to be different, right? Understanding that change means likely different. Who wants to change? And then it becomes a lot more sparse when who wants to lead the change. Human beings are creatures of habit, right? So to be a part of change is difficult. To be the one who leads the change, well, that can be, to some in their thoughts, it could be career suicide. It could be they could ostracize themselves from the group. They could ostensibly harm themselves in their mind with change if it's not intentional, or if it's not supported, or if it's not strategic. A lot of folks deny change when they feel like there's going to be a loss of power, or they don't see what's in it for them.
Javon, can I ask one quick question? If the slides will be available, we have some diligent note takers here, and they just want to know if some or all of these slides will be available.
Sure, you do that.
Thank you.
So I also do a workshop and facilitation on anti-racist leadership, right? So it starts internally, like we said, these leaders, these partnerships, and you all lead from your position, lead from within the partnerships, vendors and brands alike, right? And all support systems along, even running groups. This is important. Somebody must lead, right? And when you lead, you have to model with courage. Plan strategically. A lot of folks, if there are any sales folks on the call, are there any sales folks on the call? Can we see any? See if I can get a.
We got some hands. Yes, we got sales folks here.
I would love for, see if that doesn't block the screen too much. I would love for somebody to kind of share when they're doing a strategic plan for a new, like a new account. What are some of the things that you consider when you're looking at a new account? Strategically. Would anybody be so bold?
Jovan, this is Keith Kelly from New Balance. I'm not going to answer your question because honestly, right now, the kind of answer you're looking for probably doesn't fit into what we would do, because and I would speak for the other brands, I imagine, on this call. We work in running specialty. We kind of are in all the doors we're in, and no one's really going out actively looking for new accounts in that way. It's more new accounts open and come to us asking for an account, and then we would then look at geography and, are they opening up next door to one of our existing really good partners, things of that nature.
Okay, so if you were open, let's say maybe not new accounts, so new market space. Do you ever look into gray space or the white space to say, I would love to enter this market?
I would wish we had the opportunity to have partners in different markets for sure, but we wouldn't go in. again, it comes down to the stores. If a retail partner opens up in a certain market, we might be like, oh, we're very underrepresented there. We definitely want to get into that market versus us leading. In this industry, because we're wholesale led, on at least on these calls, we would look to partners that are opening up in markets versus us actively seeking out markets, if that makes sense.
Makes sense. Fair enough. So what the direction we're headed towards is to be intentional, right? All of it takes intentionality. All of it takes doing something different than we've done before. And I can definitely respect the look from a wholesale perspective and look at distribution and where stores are opening. Totally get it. But there's going to take some intentionality. There's going to take some change. There's going to take some instance of doing something different, even if it's a minor change. This shift of culture and these changes of systems will be slow and they will be methodical, and they won't happen overnight, right? We'll get into some of the pushback that may come from it, but the intentionality is what's most important, and the expectation that change will happen is the direction we're headed. Thank you for that feedback. So what is the value in the diverse running community? Just if anybody can show of hands or want to share their thoughts or perspective on that. Or drop it in the chat. What value do we see?
I'm Jessie. I'm with Charm City Run, and I'm just thinking about this from like a coaching perspective. And obviously, diversity in the running community opens the sport up to more people, right? When you see different types of people running from your store, from your market, you are going to attract those customers to you. You're going to attract those runners to you. So the more diverse the community, I'm here in Baltimore, so the more diverse our running community, kind of the more it opens the sport up to other people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for that share. Anyone else? Where do they see value in diverse community?
This is Rebecca with Tortoise and Hare Sports. And I think when I think of diversity in the running community, I think that, or in our stores, we have a, in our store, I think it opens up more creative and innovative ideas that we can implement, and that we can share with our team and that we can share with our community.
Absolutely. I went to my college. Thank you for that share. My college was heavy quant, right? A lot of people, linear, math, and sciences. And that works well. And Tim Wise, I've got a video on here that I think I showed a little bit last time, actually gets into where the differences may be, right? If there's opportunity for change, where that may lie, and the value add. I've got a slide at the end of the appendix that I keep, because sometimes folks just say, I don't see the value, right? And there's a slide at the end in the appendix that talks truthfully to revenue and market share. I believe it says there's a 33% difference in revenue when the executive leadership team has diversity. And I can't remember the secondary number, but as far as on the board of directors, there's another spike up. So there's actually a monetary, what's in it for me. Sometimes folks are saying, I think that's great, and that's great over there. When you talk about what's in it for me, is there's an opportunity for you to get market share, to get a different set of client base, or to diversify your client base, can sometimes be a financial incentive, right? Although it is the right thing to do, there's data that shows that it's also financially solvent to do these things that we know to be the right thing to do. Thank you for all who shared. Were there any in the chat? Did I miss any in the chat?
Yeah, there's some great ones. More properly represents the population of our community. It can be a forum, space for encouraging dialogue about diversity within communities. Running can be a shared interest that brings people together. Christopher adds, it also helps better represent our store's belief in inclusion. Jesse says, the more diverse the representation the running community gets, the more welcoming it becomes to more people. It boosts the visibility to more groups, and it provides a healthy outlet, physical, mental, emotional, to more people. Running is a great way to bring people together in community with one another, and that's got great benefits socially.
I love it. All those. Awesome. And it goes to, which I may have time for at the end of your blog, those things that it brings people together. It sounds like some things were cathartic and therapeutic in running, but also the community and kinship within the running community. That's huge, right? And why not expose as many people as possible to that, right? If it works for you, why not expose that to as many people as possible to create a greater good, right? It takes, I say this, I have Southern roots, but it takes all types. There are all different types of ingredients for the gumbo, right? But you got to get the roux right first. And everybody plays a part in creating that roux in the gumbo, right? Thank you all for that share. So here's what happens when people join the team or there's opportunities within a workspace. People have to leave some things behind, some things that they hold true and dear. And from an internal perspective, we have to be mindful of it, right? They leave their opinions, hairstyle. I was just consulting with the team. They just recently updated their employee handbook to not say messy hairstyle, right? Because that is up to that is up to the perspective of whoever is in charge of that, right? Whoever is the hairstyle police, they would be the judge, jury, and ruler on that. And that should not be the case. Foods, values, foods. So another situation I was in, it was difficult to hear that a really large organization had microaggressions, which I do a really good facilitation and workshop on microaggressions, that there were microaggressions against folks whose dietary differences created divisiveness, right? And I think this was around maybe fish or a curry dish, right? And folks didn't like the way that they just felt like, oh, this was terrible. This, signs on the, first they said it in the meeting, then there were signs on the microwave. And this was a divisive point, right? And I think people don't realize that if this is something that's cultural or it's something that people hold to, we know that in certain communities, food is a huge, in my community, I just shared a little gumbo with you, right? Food is a big part of folks' community. It doesn't have to just be people of color, right? It is usually a tenet, right? Folks gather around the table in order to commune and fellowship and kith and kin, right? And then for them to have to deny that. And I get it because, and listen, this is the work that we do. I would learn every day. So I will say this, if burnt popcorn is a part of your cultural difference, my apologies, right? I think we can all agree that burning popcorn is not okay. But outside of that, I think we have to, I'm just kidding. A couple of people are like, hold on a second. But I think we have to be mindful and intentional about what kind of allowing people to bring their whole self to work. And if that food is, and instead of being a nice opportunity to step in, and if that doesn't smell to your liking, let's ask questions. I noticed that said, tell me a little bit about, was that dill, was that cumin, was that curry? Like, ask questions, right? Because this conversation could either be one of divisiveness or inclusiveness. It really breaks it down, right? Your observation is just your observation. It is how you handle it and how you interact, how you connect with the person that decides if this is going to be an inclusive conversation or we're going to choose this as an opportunity to be divisive. It is on you as a receiver or the observer, right? And like I said before, there's ideas, there's culture, there's background, language, communication style, sexual orientation. PricewaterhouseCoopers, love them. If you get an opportunity, some of the videos I have come from PricewaterhouseCoopers and some of my facilitations. I think I did a couple here. But a workplace can only be diverse if the people who work there can be themselves, right? I was in a workshop learning and growing similar to you all. And it was a chief diversity officer. I do not remember the organization, but when they said is, if diversity is in the room and diversity does not have a voice, or diversity does not speak, you do not have diversity in the room, right? They're just there, but it is not diverse. It is not inclusive. There is no belonging there. It is It is the figurehead, right? It is window dressing. We want those diverse, we want all of this, opinions, hairstyle, food, values. We want all of that to be prevalent and for folks to feel like they belong. Business case for diversity. So we spoke about it a little bit, but here's some opportunity that we can do with a colorful perspective, right? It drives innovation, increases bottom line. People feel valued. I'll just click and walk and read these. Captures new clients. It doesn't sound like that. The new client capture mode is in your operating or your growth model for some folks. But I think for some vendors, there may be some opportunities to look at who do you want to partner with? Who do you want to support, right? And knowing, and you may be a brand and want that support and may not be getting the support you like because it matters to a vendor. It may matter to those who are seeking this progressiveness of humanity, right? Multicultural environment is better than monocultural, absolutely. Out of the box thinking. Attracts the best talent. We'll talk about the talent attraction towards the end of this, but as you can see, there's a business case for it outside of just what our heart knows to be the right thing. There's a business case for us to do the right thing. As we said before, is there a perfect time? Will there not be resistant to be the leader of change? These are some of the things you think about, right? I think you'll remember this from my last interaction, right? There's self-doubt. There's a level of comfort that we all have well, not we all have, that some may have with the status quo. Why change anything? We'll see later on as to people's perspective is, can we have change and can we still have growth, or can we still have change and quality, right? Conditions aren't ideal. Rarely are conditions ideal. I think we had a groundswell a couple of summers back when we look at the murder of George Floyd, and we look at what happened in Atlanta with some Asian hate. I think folks then would say the conditions would have been ideal, right? We're all sitting at home and we're all glued to what's happening in the world and specifically in our country. That conditions may have seemed ideal then, but for those who are instituting change, it was not, right? There will never be a perfect time for this. But the time to do the right thing is always now, right? That is one of my favorite quotes, and I can't say that I kept that. Maybe, yeah, I don't want to lie to you who it was, but incredible quote, and one that I live by. Let's talk about it. So here are some of the things that will affect you as you want to institute change. These norms happen across the board when you're having crucial conversations. If we broke this down, a lot of this is things that we're already doing, right? If you were doing a quarterly review with a partner, with a direct report, most relationships that we have in business and at work, these type of things would happen, right? You're going to experience discomfort. You're going to have to take risks. You're going to stay engaged, listen for understanding, speak your truth, expect and accept non-closure, no fixing. Some of the most important things on this from these conversations that you're about to have and the internal look within, experience discomfort and take risks. If you don't take risks, there'll be nothing gained, right? If you hold back or if you play it close to the vest, you miss out on the opportunity for the connection. And there's going to be discomfort when you're having these conversations externally from a knowledge perspective, internally from a perspective of own privilege, right? Somebody shares with you a microaggression that they felt like you may have committed, a microaggression that you've seen. How do you address that? There's going to be some discomfort. The most important thing, though, is to stay engaged and to continue the process. An external view. For most, intentionality matters. When you're looking for partnerships, when you're looking for talent, the intentionality matters. Now, I do another section when we talk about intent versus results, right? And they can be different. But in this situation, as you are showing folks your intention to be progressive, your intentions to connect, your intentions that diversity matters, your intentionality definitely matters. But when you're looking at intent versus impact, which we talk about later, or in a different facilitation, I think there's a bigger and a deeper look into it. But from a surface level, from an attraction of talent, before they even get to know you, your intentionality definitely matters. Let's think about it. Before you post a position, get credit for the work you're doing. Show the external world and potential candidates the progress you've made and the work being done for your intentionality, right? That's how you will attract talent. That's how you'll do it. Do the work and then share with folks that you're doing the work. It would be unfortunate for you to do all this work and hold it all in and then not have a medium to show folks or to attract folks where this work really matters. So we'll dig in a bit. There's a great example that should be near and dear to you all's heart. Here's what showing the works look like. Some institutional change, some diversity policy, right? Is it a part of your mission and vision statement? Is it intentionally a part of your policies and practices, right? What is your leadership commitment? And then where's the accountability? It sounds great to say this, but if there's no governance or no accountability with it, right? It's just words, there are no deeds, right? I'll read this one a few times, I'll read it directly. But I really feel like this is a great diversity policy. We're committed to working toward fairness and inclusion for all, and this begins with our employees. Practicing inclusiveness means giving employees support and opportunity to use their various skills and abilities within the workplace and removing barriers that limit the ability of people to fulfill their potential. With this in mind, we highly value diversity of people and their unique work experiences. We strive to be inclusive in this organization by treating others with dignity. I think that is a great diversity policy. And if there's an opportunity for your diversity policy to mirror or to align itself, right, with your overall strategic plan, your overall mission and vision statement, that's the next level, right? So it's one thing to have a specific policy and to take a stand, as we'll see in a few moments. That's another thing for it to really show by being a part of your current mission and vision statement. Here's an outward show of solidarity, but really governance in an organization. As you know, some time ago, that North Carolina had an issue as pertains to restrooms, right? So this was Washington State's government organizations who take requests for proposals. Here's what their stance on any work that was coming from North Carolina. So this legislation excludes lesbian, gay, and transgender people from the law's protection while simultaneously barring cities and counties from passing their own protection for LGBTQ plus people. Additionally, it bars people from using bathrooms that do not match their birth gender. As it pertains to King County, which is where I'm from, we cannot allow the taxes and fees paid by the communities we serve to be used to subsidize legally sanctioned discrimination. Bids and proposals submitted by firms with headquarters located in North Carolina will be deemed non-responsible. And as you know, in request for proposal, being responsive is one of the most important things you can do, right? Is to be able to show that you have the ability to do the work and that you're willing to do the work. And in this situation, King County has said, regardless of your capability, until this changes, we will not do business with you. Your bids will now be seen as non-responsive. That's a really hard line. It's a really huge stance to take, right? Because there's an opportunity that maybe this is Washington State, this is Seattle, and I believe that Boeing has a site in North Carolina. It's one of their largest sites. So to be able to not do business or for any interaction from a King County perspective to not be able to do business there, they're taking a risk, but they're taking a stance. And they're also showing that this will hit you in your pockets. If you're not connecting with people, if you're not willing to do the right thing in our eyes, this will hit you in your pockets. So why diversity? No one said it from that perspective, but here's a reason why. A self-preservation perspective. Sometimes doing the right thing is just the right thing. Sometimes doing the right thing, not doing the right thing comes at a cost. We won't have much time for this, so we'll press on. We'll have more time to kind of interact. I want to talk about a little bit of equality and equity. I think you'll remember this from my last one. I think a lot of folks have seen this in the past. Equality is everybody has the same resources. Equity is giving those the resources that greatly need. Another piece of equity, I was working with a really large not-for-profit organization, and they really had a problem with the equity. And I think it is, they are not for profit, but they understood the business of it all. And they were kind of, I think they forgot my background, right? So they were kind of talking about, from a business perspective, I don't know if equity is the right thing to do. So we will talk business on this because I don't think I did this last time. In any of my roles that I've had as an operator at any level, it is very important that if you're driving revenue, you control the cost, right? In order to create the best margin, right? Working in healthcare, naturally the patient care, the patient service, direct patient care is the most important things, but like most say, no margin, no mission. So in this situation, if I were the executive to the left and the correct answer was the executive to the right, it would mean that if I was on the left, I would be mismanaging resources. I would literally be mismanaging resources. Why would you give that box to the person on the left, right? Let's say these boxes were $100,000. You still have one person who cannot do the work while you've got somebody, paying their services and probably losing their engagement. These boxes are $100,000 each. That person, you're not taking the box away. The person should have never had the box in the first place. The resources were mismanaged, right? So a prudent executive would likely allocate resources in the places that they should go. So this is another way of looking at it, because not everybody's in the same place with this, right? Some folks see it as a business imperative. Some folks see it as a moral and ethical imperative. And I think a lot of us see it as both, a great intersectionality. So from a business perspective, mismanagement or misuse of funds or resources. Here's the example that I gave for another analogy is these three kids are told that they have a summer job, and they're told by the person who they're in charge of that they have to pick 50 apples by the end of the day. And if they pick the 50 apples, they get paid their full $5. What equality says is the tall guy who, the apples are already in his reach, he's going to get his 50 apples. Person in the middle is going to get their 50 apples. The person on the right is not likely to get their 50 apples unless they just fall off the tree. That is not equitable. Here's the difference from equity and equality, right? And I think this, hopefully this draws this resonates a little better. The goal, the outcome, and the results are still the same. You just put the child on the right in a place, or the person on the right in a place where they can be successful. It is still 50 apples. And they still have to get it done to get their $5. They didn't drop his expectation down to 40 and give him a box. They didn't drop it down to 30. They gave him the extra box in order for them to be successful where they are, and the expectation is still the same, right? That's the point. Talk to you a little bit about Tim Wise, outstanding orator, but he's a really great ally in the work that we're doing. He's going to tell us kind of what we should be looking for in this interview process, and we'll get to the interview process from a skills perspective later. But what we should be looking for to level set our mindset on potential candidates. And it may not be what we thought.
Okay, in terms of hiring, you said to examine criteria. What would be one criteria that you think in all hiring should be there then?
I think that probably the most important criteria, and there are multiple ways to assess it, some of which, by the way, if you're interested in, I mentioned the non-cognitive variables. Most of the research on this was done by the head of the counseling center at the University of Maryland for many years, a guy named William Sedlacek, S-E-D-L-A-C-E-K. And his website is actually linked on my website, which is timwise.org, in the links section. So you can actually look at some of the ways that he assesses NCVs and encourages institutions to assess them. I think that perhaps the most important criteria is that perseverance criteria, because again, there's an awful lot of research, some of Sedlacek's and others as well, which demonstrates that the ability to overcome professional crisis, setback, barriers, obstacles, difficulties, tensions, are the kinds of skills that actually make for the best employees long-term, also for the best students. And so figuring out ways, maybe 2 or 3 ways to get at perseverance by really, first of all, of course, when someone's applying for a job, really getting to sort of know their background beyond that resume, beyond the obvious, beyond the formal, asking the kinds of questions that get at that issue. And of course, you know, the reality is it won't just be people of color or working class folks or women of whatever race or ethnicity who have overcome obstacles. There'll be plenty of white guys who have too. And that's the kind of white guy that you need in the institution. I mean, it's not that we're saying like white men are totally, you know, obsolete and don't have to get any of these jobs. It's just that we want the kind of person, whether white or of color, male or female, who has these kinds of character-based skills that our traditional criteria just don't get at. And so coming up with maybe 2 or 3 ways to assess perseverance, obstacle overcoming, the sort of overcomer tendencies that we need, because most of that research in the last 5, 10, 15 years around human resources, and particularly who make the best human resources in institutions, all of it sort of finds that adaptability, that flexibility within the workplace, and the ability to work together in teams collaboratively is another one, right? We know that a lot of times people who score really highly on like traditional criteria of ability are lousy at teamwork, right? So for instance, and this is not necessarily what would come into play in the job market, but you know, people who have really high formal IQ, for whatever that's worth, and it's worth really very little. For people who have really high test scores and did really well in traditional academic settings, they're oftentimes really horrible at working with other people, in part because they feel so superior to them that they're not willing to take other people's recommendations, right? So in a way, like being really traditionally skilled might not be what you're looking for. You want that person who is actually obviously skilled, obviously capable, obviously has something going on between the ears in terms of their abilities, right? But who also has that proven capacity for working in collaborative and collective settings and working with others, taking advice, taking criticism, taking feedback, and overcoming obstacles. So I would recommend looking at some of the non-cognitive variable information, but those are the criteria.
All right. So from that perspective, Tim shared with us. I like him, and I show him a lot. I think I showed him last time, because I think sometimes as we're pushing through in our zeal and our excitement for diversity, I think that there is a group that kind of gets left out, right? And I wouldn't be the leader that I believe that I am, and that I say that I am, if I just were to be divisive, right? If everything I had a spirit or a hint of divisiveness to it. But there's space for everyone. It's just looking for the opportunity and equitability of it all. Changing culture takes time, right? These are some old preteens. These news kids smoking cigars, delivering newspapers, right? It was a different time then. There was a time where smoking was not seen to be bad for your health, and I also did not wear a seatbelt from the ages of probably 2 to 8. I actually thought that hump, which is now called an armrest, but that hump, I actually thought that was my seat, in the front seat, right? My grandparents loved me. I know they loved me. At least they said they loved me. But that little armrest that used to fold down in the cars in the 70s and 80s, I thought that was a seat for me. Come to find out, my life was in jeopardy. So changing culture takes time, and it takes a new perspective and a new way of looking at things. Your advertising and outreach. If we can come back to this, we will. But I think we late start, and I do like to talk to you all, so we'll push forward. But I do want you to see the question. Why is it that diverse talent may not choose us? Also known as no diverse candidates interviewed. I ran across that in my corporate life, and it was a really deep and interesting conversation. But a lot of it started how we're starting now, and it was an internal look at kind of our awareness and what was our commitment or their commitment to attracting those diverse candidates. Similarity bias, right? So we talk about networking and people like me, and walking into a room, and you're going to naturally assimilate to the people that like you. You're going to gravitate to those who are people like you, not assimilate, but gravitate towards them, strike up conversation. Now, there was a point where I almost put in a networking video in here, but that's an easy out, right? I think folks know how to network. I think folks know how to connect. And if they don't, I'll share this story with you. So this is a shameless plug for just our group, right? So I went to Kellogg at Northwestern for my MBA, and we did a social impact trip to South Africa. Our trip was really well done, really well put together, but they hadn't put together which silos or columns that we were going to do for the trip, right? So it ended up being like a financial, food and services, tourism, so on and so forth. How do all of these things in South Africa as a way that they drive commerce in their economy, how can they add more diversity to it? Mine's happened to be finance. I chose finance because I thought that oftentimes most folks say if it doesn't make dollars, it doesn't make sense. How do I address this? One of the reasons why I choose to work in non-GMO space, right? I believe that government entities, I think that civil servants, they have an understanding that they're going to come across diverse people with or without their intentionality, right? I think in the private space is where we have to be intentional. So for me, in the financial space, I also believe we have to be intentional because we can make numbers say kind of what we like. So in this perspective, I had to get this trip to South Africa. Naturally, I'm not from South Africa, I'm from Seattle, so I don't know anyone. So now I have to do my due diligence to say, who do I want to meet in South Africa, right? What will make part of this trip be very worthwhile? So I looked around, I was doing some research, and I came across Google South Africa. They were doing this competition for young entrepreneurs. So I'm just reading the bio on it and came across this gentleman. And he was the senior vice president and the campus general manager for Google, all of Google South Africa, which is huge, right? South Africa is humongous. And I said, I really would like to meet this guy, to have this foresight. And what I did is I just connected. I started to connect. I started to do the work. I started to connect with a bunch of different people who may have been in circumference. To be able to see if I can get a meeting with them. And they all said, oh, he's a great guy. He's a great guy. So from the outer fringes all the way up into his internal network, I was able to connect with him. And in this situation, outside of this trip being an incredible, watershed moment for me, one of the things he said has stuck with me for, since we met. And he started our meeting off with, I'm born in South Africa. So I was born into bondage. I was born in apartheid, and I was born into oppression. That's how he started that meeting off. I was almost in tears from that perspective, right? His experience being born in South Africa, being born in apartheid, was a powerful one that he shared with us, right? But if I waited to kind of do it the natural way or hoping that, I get out there or just, there's no way that I could be able to get to him, I would have missed out on that opportunity. I would have missed out on an opportunity to meet one of the most dynamic people I've ever met in my life. So that's us in the campus at Google South Africa. So I say all that to say that me showing you a video on how to network would probably be belying this process, right? If we want to get things done, if we want to get to folks, we know a way to do it. And with the internet, there used to be 6 degrees of separation. There's 3, right? And then there were further relationships we built just from coming into contact with him. So the ask is, and the opportunity is to really be intentional about your network and stay away from that similarity bias. I noticed a couple more in the chat. Is there any feedback in the chat?
Yeah, people were commenting on the question that you posed but didn't ask. Why is it that diverse talent may not choose us? And so a question that came out of that was, the issue of being the first, right? Somebody has to be the first into a space where there aren't any of those people. So how do you make that person feel welcome and like they belong, and assure them that they don't represent the entire Black race, the entire X? So what are the conditions? How do you create those conditions and signal to those people that you'll be safe here as the first?
I think you talk to people from that community that you're looking to attract, and you ask them, what can I do to create a safe space? What can I do to show allyship, right? And they're probably going to say, first and foremost, you're going to have to, develop yourself to being an ally. You're going to have to develop yourself into creating that safe space, and we can have a further conversation, right? And then you have that conversation when there's trust built, and you build that space. You build that connective medium for things to happen. But it won't happen if you're trying to do it from your own perspective. Because as we said before, the implicit biases will show up. You will have to reach out. You will have to connect. There are people on this call who are diverse. There are people on this call who've got different backgrounds. I would say you start there. For us, some folks do it from school. I looked in, we got a couple of job descriptions, and I think both of them had, like you had to have a university experience, or you had to have a bachelor's degree from internally of your school. I know a lot of schools are pretty homogenous, but there likely are some people in your school or that you came from, or your surroundings or your clubs that are diverse. Reach out to them, build trust. One of the slides I have moving forward is around that trust, and I do a workshop on trust. Is you have to be the one. If you truly believe that in your heart, you must reach out. Expecting them to reach out to you, or expecting for them to say, okay, this is a job that pays fair wages, it's honest living, I'd like to work there. It's not likely the case. A lot of people are vying for top talent. A lot of people are vying for diverse talent. So you must make that first step forward. Great question. Let's broaden our perspective. Quick video.
People say that if you want something done well, you should do it yourself. Or at the very least, find someone just like you to do it. Okay, maybe they don't say that last part, but that's often what we do. All thanks to similarity bias. Similarity bias happens when we're drawn towards people who seem familiar or remind us of ourselves. Which is okay if you're casting for the role of twin, but not okay if you need to work with others to accomplish a goal. So why do we think like this? Well, experts tell us it's how we've evolved. Our early ancestors had to learn how to survive, to assess quickly between friend or foe. As generations passed down their culture's survival techniques, they also shared their blind spots. And we're still applying these old in-group and out-group biases to our social networks today. Picture your neighbors, your friends, your closest colleagues. Chances are the people in your inner circle are pretty similar to you. Let's test this idea. Imagine you're at a networking event. You quickly scan the room to see who's there. Which group would you gravitate towards? Would it be this one? Or this one? Or how about this one? Did you instantly recognize the group you'd be most comfortable with? Studies show we often gravitate towards people who we think are similar to us, based on shared social identities. If this dynamic of similarity bias naturally happens at networking events, what might that mean in workplaces? Research has shown that when supervisors rate their subordinates, the more similar the parties are, the higher the rating the supervisor tends to give. Another study showed that interviewers prefer candidates who have similar demographics or attitudes to their own. Similarity bias means you may be unintentionally giving opportunities to others based on something going on in your unconscious mind. Getting past similarity bias is important because it's the right thing to do and it's the smart thing to do. According to a survey by PwC, a majority of directors believe diversity positively impacts their board and company, and many studies have shown that diverse teams perform better. Companies with the highest levels of racial diversity brought in nearly 15 times more sales revenue than those with the lowest levels. And in the S&P 1500, female representation in top management was found to improve performance in firms focused on the strategy of innovation. Bottom line, diversity is good for people, for businesses, and for society. So how can we outsmart our unconscious mind? How can we get past similarity bias to build more inclusive environments? First, you can examine your network. Who's in it? Who's not? Don't unintentionally exclude people who aren't like you. Open the door to your inner circle. Invite others with different experiences and perspectives in. You can learn a lot from them. And encourage ideas. It's one thing to give someone a seat at the table, it's another to give them a voice. You'll be amazed at how your own perspective might change. You know, I see a lot of myself in you, but I think it's time for something different.
Like we said, all of that takes intentionality, right? Those blind spots that jump up are likely unintentional. You're on autopilot. You just look up and your network looks and feels and speaks similar to you do. It takes us to be intentional for us to break that. So that was the intention around that. That similarity bias is a comfort zone. If you remember the little cartoon of the person in the wading pool on top of the diving board, right? There's a comfort there in not moving and not changing. It's like we said before, be intentional, create a safe space, and do the work. Enter into those communities, and entering those communities is going to take some effort. It's going to take some work on your side. Advertising and outreach, like I said previously, now most organizations are looking for this diverse talent, right? There's tough competition out there because people are seeing the value. She mentioned some things. I'm glad I didn't have the right numbers in there because I would have stole her thunder. She mentioned some great numbers as it pertains to productivity and results. Folks are looking for that. High-performing organizations, high-performing teams, high-performing relationships, high-performing communities are looking for that, right? And continue to prime the pump. Continue to do the work. Continue to, things like this. Continue to reach out to communities, but don't stop because consistency is the answer. You can't be an ally on Monday and then have high microaggression productivity on Wednesday, right? You can't be the purveyor of microaggressions in your team circle and organization. So the consistency is the most important. Because if you're walking the walk, you're able to talk the talk. And people who are looking for this will be looking for your consistency. Advertising outreach. Of everything I said, this is probably what most people are looking for, but to me is one of the least consequential. It's tactical, right? These are things, what do I need to do to address this or to attract this or to be a part of this, right? That's what this is. This is tactical. And Jovan said, do this. So if I do this and it doesn't work, maybe there is no diverse talent out there. That is the part that I want to move away from. So I do it because I know people need ideas, but I think that this is of all things that I say is of the least consequence because the work must be done internally. You can do all of these things from a strategic and a tactical point of view, but if you haven't done the work, you're not going to be able to keep them. Ultimately, you need trust. If you want to go into new communities, if you want to build new relationships, there has to be trust. Workshop I do on trust digs into that. There are some things from a trust perspective that I think are not natural to folks. I think there's an opportunity where we look at what we say to build trust. There are oftentimes some things we don't say. Also, what is our body language as we're building trust? What is our intentionality as we're building trust? What is our end goal? And is that natural? Is it felt by those you're building trust with? Are they feeling like this is a means to an end? Or are you really connecting with them? Are you really trying to build community with me? We talk about that. Mitigating biases we spoke to, and just hiring practices. This will probably be the last video I'll show you, but it breaks down the art and the science as to why you may get one or two diverse candidates and why you don't hire them. And you can say, hey, I thought that guy was really great, or that lady was really great, or whatever the case may be, was great, but it just didn't work out. There's some art and science to as to why.
Companies have invested hundreds of millions of dollars in diversity initiatives, yet roughly 85% of board members and executives are still white men. Despite our best intentions, there are still unconscious biases that make people reluctant to go against the status quo. One study looked at these biases in both controlled and real-world scenarios and found that the diversity of a candidate pool had a huge impact on who got the job. In one experiment, participants decided between 3 male finalists. If 2 were white and 1 was black, participants tended to choose a white candidate. But if 2 out of 3 candidates were black, they tended to choose a black candidate. In another experiment that looked at gender instead of race, participants had to decide between 3 equally qualified candidates up for the role of nurse manager. Even for a position that is stereotypically held by more women, participants tended to choose a man if men outnumbered women in the finalist candidate pool. You may think this is basic probability, but the numbers suggest otherwise. To confirm this, the researchers went outside of the lab and examined a real university's hiring decisions. They found that when there was only one woman or minority candidate in a pool of 4 finalists, they don't stand a chance of being hired. But that changes dramatically when there is more than one. And the difference between having 1 and 2 women seems to be what matters. The odds of hiring a woman were about 79 times greater if there were at least 2 of them in the finalist pool. And the odds of hiring a minority were 193 times greater if there were at least 2 minority candidates in the finalist pool. And this effect held, no matter the size of the pool. Having only 1 woman or minority in a pool of finalists highlights how different he or she is from the norm, and decision makers often unconsciously associate difference with risk or even incompetence. Managers need to know that working to get just 1 woman or minority considered for a position might be futile. But if they can change the status quo of the finalist pool by including 2, then diversity has a fighting chance.
79 and 193. I know it went by kind of fast and folks are taking notes. And if I give you my slides, that won't be in it. But 79 and 190, that's a big deal. X, not percent, but X. Those are real numbers. So there are art and science to it, but the science is telling us that you have to have more diverse candidates and more serious diverse candidates. And you must take them serious in order for this to be successful. The difference or the abnormality of it puts them in a place where they're not true candidates, what this data is telling us. There we go from this perspective. No one applied. What are we doing from an internal perspective? What is your reputation in the market? Some folks will say it's a juice versus squeeze. We'll get into some job description here coming up. So I'll have to push through this slide. Job description language. These are some of the things you want on your job description to show your cultural competence, to show your allyship, to show your movement in the direction that you're headed or your intentionality in the organization. Got a good example of this coming up. From the outside looking in, when diverse candidates are considering applying for a position, they may look at the job announcement to see if the organization states a commitment to social justice or cultural competency practices. That's what all those bubbles basically are saying. That is important to me. I have an expectation to see some of that verbiage or some of that lexicon or some of that language in how you reach out to me or how you try to attract me, right? Because that's what a job rec is, right? We're trying to attract talent. We're reaching out to attract or bring in talent or partnerships or request for proposal from a vendorship. We're looking to attract someone. Go to a quick job description, right? As we break this down, we will see that there are opportunities here. We blotted out the names to protect the innocent. So blank is the engine behind Greatest Races. We strive to inspire any and all to move with us, best known for organizing the acclaimed annual marathon, also organized a variety of other high quality races, trainings, runs, health fitness programs throughout the region. There's an opportunity in this first sentence to speak a little bit more about who they are and what they're trying to do, who they want to attract, what's important to them as they're looking to attract talent. We prize high quality and creative work, and we produce professional and innovative results. I won't go too deep into this, but they're telling you what is most important. And one of the things that is missing is the opportunity to add diversity here, right? This is what we prize. We prize or we value, or potentially could be said, we incentivize, we hold true, high quality and creative work, and we produce professional and innovative results, events and programs, so on and so forth. So there's an opportunity in those first two paragraphs to add a level of diversity or to speak to some diversity or to signal that this is an organization that values diversity. And that second paragraph, it tells you what it values. Not bad, but just an opportunity. These are all observations. It doesn't denigrate. It doesn't mean that this is completely wrong and nobody else will come and work for you. But as we're looking at the job description and have a job description tool, we look at what's in there and we compare it to see, is there opportunity, right? And I appreciate whoever shared this. It was courageous enough to share a job description with us. Here we go. select and hire properly qualified persons to serve as members of the youth programming team and maintain appropriate personnel records. As we break this down, there's an opportunity to add some diversity in here. Select and hire properly diverse candidates, qualified people. The ultimate piece about this whole job description is there's an opportunity for grassroots connectivity, because this is a youth program, right? So if you want to start at a base, if you want to build your clients, you want to build your workforce, you want to build your partnerships of tomorrow, the youth is a perfect place to start. And in this, we missed the opportunity to say, hey, we're expecting someone who's got an experience in hiring properly qualified or hiring diverse talent, right? There's an opportunity to put that in there. Provide direction and management of youth program marketing, including website content. Works in partnership with the marketing team to advertise youth programs and youth events, as well as to pursue public relation opportunities. This is an opportunity, once again, to talk about what public relation opportunities, right? Where do you want to go? What youth events, right? Diverse youth events. Have an expectation in there. If you're not doing it now, let's have some intentionality about where we want to go in the future. And somebody may come to you and say, you know what? I don't have that experience. You can ask them, well, since you don't have that experience, how would you partner with us for us to be able to still do this, right? Tell us a little bit about how you've done it in the past, how you've worked in a diverse matrix workforce, or to quote your own lexicon, but to add some diversity and give them something to think about, something to work towards, especially in these panel interviews. Maybe an opportunity may come to them shorter in the past and give them that opportunity to answer or to grow with you. You know what, as an organization, we're also working towards this. So we would love your partnership in building in you know, technically the urban markets or the LGBTQ plus markets or just underrepresented markets. We would love for your partnership in that, right? Are you willing to commit to that partnership? Is a great way to do it. And okay, there was a quick nod in there, ability to work effectively in collaboration with a diverse group of people, including diverse staff, parents, children, community members. It's a great start, right? But I've got the tool at the other side of it that'll tell us a bit about, you know, what good is, what great is, what is basic and what is advanced. Bachelor's degree, here's an opportunity, here's just some experience that would satisfy in lieu of a degree. Instead of having, you know, 5 years experience here, could you have 5 years experience or 7 years, 9 years in lieu of a bachelor's degree, right? Valid driver's license. I don't know if said anything about driving in this role, right? Some of you all are from the Northeast, and my buddy from New York, he didn't have a driver's license until he was like 35 and moved out west, right? So is a driver's license germane to this role? Or is it just a form of identification? Second one, this one is good. This one was a bit more difficult, a bit more technical, right? You're looking at senior footwear developer. So this is highly technical. And it is the opportunity to change some of the verbiage as far as the needs and the job requirements was difficult, right? Like you have to be a subject matter expert and have some experience in this. On the job training, maybe for a base level footwear developer, for a senior footwear developer, you're gonna have to have tons of experience. You're gonna have to be in this market, so, or in this industry. So to make any of those type of changes to make it a little more appealing to those who aren't in this market would be really difficult, because this is very subject matter expertise. But there's an opportunity here. This feels like a mission statement / core values introduction. And in the mission statement / core values introduction, there's no mention of diversity. There's mention of the organization, what you plan to do, what your mission is. They're speaking to runner first, word is bond, champion heart. There's no iron run, keep moving. Sounds like core values. There's no mention of diversity anywhere. And speaking of no mention of diversity, the last thing from the last one was there was no diversity statement at all. Not even an equal opportunity statement on here. Not to say that it didn't exist, but what I received you didn't even have an EEOC on it, right? So from that perspective, where this one ended, this one picked up, no mention of diversity. And if you're going to share your full mission and core values, you'd be hard pressed. Now there's a little touch with our humanity, with, you know, give it our all, our journeys with our humanity. It sounds good, but to whom are you speaking? You may be giving it your all to a certain group, generous with your humanity with a certain group, but there's nothing explicit to signal to somebody that this is important to them, that you value them, or that you would even celebrate them. Right? Mentor and development personnel and develop personnel and other than the football team potential to manage less experienced team members. Excellent opportunity, right? As an expectation to add diversity, right? As we start to our next session, we'll talk about retaining talent, right? In this situation, you want to be able to create, it doesn't have to be an employee resource group, but you want to be able to create an environment where folks will stay. And if they've never negotiated the waters of your organization, they've never negotiated the waters of this partnership, they may not know. So this leader should be somebody who develops and mentors folks who are new to this environment, right? Because that's ultimately what coaching and mentorship is, right? It's putting you in a place where you can thrive in this environment for the greater good. Lead Asia development trips, but there's no mention of cultural competence as it pertains to where Asia's large, where you're going in Asia. Is there anything there's nothing that speaks to, it would be a bonus if you knew certain languages. There's no nod to it, just that you'd be open to lead Asia development trips. No cultural competency there. Now, at the end of this one, they did have a diversity statement. It is pretty good. It's one, it didn't have it in the other one, but there's one that is at least prevalent, and it is there. But I will tell you, it was on page 4 of a 4-page job rec. And I don't know who's going to page 4. That might be the way that I laid it out. It might have been the way that I put it together, that it was 4 pages. However you shake it out, it was on the 4th page and at the bottom, right? So this is a long way to go to really understand what you mean by diversity. And from that perspective, it would be hard pressed for me to think that this far down the job description, that this is a priority to you. We were made aware of what the priorities were, and it was not in this in the beginning. But it is still kudos to them for having a diversity statement or at least a nod to the work that they're doing. This is part of the tool that we looked at. So what language is used, we're looking at specific words in the job description or in the posting to say, is it basic or is it advanced? I'll have to push on really quick because I got a good example. Model with courage, right? I like this example. Anybody familiar with this one?
Hey.
Hey, right? Committed to racial justice. These are powerful words, and these are words that are indicators to folks that you are working, you are on a journey, right? Understanding it's rooted in whiteness and systemic racism that is no longer something we will stand for. Systemic racism is a big word, right? A lot of folks are not putting that on their outward collateral. That is a clear indicator that work is being done here and that you will be celebrated likely, and work will continue, hence why we are here today. Commitment to anti-racism. I think that's on the gold star list of things when you have outward collateral, you have an outward presence. These are all things that are advanced as it pertains to your outward presence. So I want to give you all kudos to that work. We are running short on time. I would like to end it here in order, of course, to have a few minutes for questions. But I would be remiss if I didn't share with you some of the work that I don't know if everybody's been able to see, but the work that you all are doing is lending itself to modeling the behavior of an organization that is on its way to allyship.
Thank you, Jovan. We have a question here. Can you ask about how the industry can combat the myth of the pipeline problem, especially regarding hiring at senior levels? I so often hear white decision makers saying that there are no qualified candidates. How do we get people to think differently about how we define qualification? Right. Oh, that's such a great question. And it goes back to that like me bias, right? It is showing, for one, the data shows you, right? So showing them that data. I've got some data from McKinsey, right? So if you didn't like the data from PricewaterhouseCoopers, I've got data from McKinsey that most people know as a Big Four consulting firm would share with you.
if they are having that issue, right? Because we go out for the talent that we want, right? We go for the tier. When I got my MBA, I got more calls from different organizations because of the level of that MBA. So when we want a targeted, rich environment, or we're going after potential talent, we know where to go. We've got an idea, right? That like need bias, you're going to go to tier one, MBA programs or legacy undergrad programs. What we have to do is actually show them the data, right? And it's got to be important to them. If it is not important, they will always have excuses and reasons to why not choose, but the data is here. She spoke about the data in the video, and the data is actually here as well. So, and this is not, it may be news to some, but after you're sharing it, there's no reason or there's no excuse for operating in any other fashion. Diversity makes a difference to margins. That's what it is.
Kiara shared a comment that I want to turn into a question about how do you balance a sense of urgency for a position being filled with those people, diverse communities not applying, right? Like I know, for example, somebody just sent me, they're looking for a new board member, but the application already closed. And so they're battling like, wait, but we didn't have any, like there was no racial diversity in the client pool. Like, what do we do? So how do you manage those seemingly competing interests?
I would say you have the influence, intentionality for us to wait. I mean, it may not be by design, but it felt like by design if you wait until the end of the closing of the rec to now say all of a sudden we don't have diverse. When you know this opportunity is coming available, somebody reached out to me a little while ago about being their CEIO. This role will not come available for 8 months. They were being very intentional about who they wanted. When I got reached out to one of the boards that I'm on, they reached out to me 6 months in advance to say, hey, we're going to have an opening on this board. Would you be open to applying for it? So I think having that intentionality and doing it, so you have the opportunity to do so, right? But it also means we got to do the work now. Like I said, priming the pump, right? As a group, we should be priming the pump. We should be doing the outreach. We should be creating trust as it currently stands, the outward lexicon, our outward collateral to show who we are so that people take a note. So if you have the opportunity to go to one of those functions or go to interact with one of those groups that I had on the slide, it's gonna show that they're gonna be appreciated in that. Representation matters, right? Send people who they may trust to believe in it, and they can have a frank conversation with, right? Allison, you work for this organization. Tell me a little bit about your experience, right? And one would hope that Allison's experience would be positive, right? You're sending out, and if it's not, then you may want to make sure that her experience is positive before you start to pull in others into an experience that, this is going to be fraught for lack of retention.
I love that last comment. It seems so obvious, but it's not, right? Like if the space is not welcoming, you probably don't want to get more people who are not going to feel welcome in that space. And that is, I think that's a key learning. Absolutely.
And in my microaggressions, I do want to, there's a large organization in this country that spends hundreds of millions of dollars on marketing. And they made some blunders as it pertains to their marketing. And it was because they didn't have diverse folks likely in the room. And if you look at the marketing, it is likely that there is some underlying things that are happening in this organization that they would think that these marketing campaigns were okay, right? No safe space, right? Or it was an echo chamber. And if you did have a diverging perspective, you're likely to either be dismissed or to be kind of shooed away. So having that safe space and making sure you're treating those there well.
Thank you, Javon.
You got it.
Any other questions? I think, oh, there we go. Here's a question. I was going to say it might be helpful if somebody was like workshopping a job description and wanted to ask about language, like you can share that here. This question is, how do you respectfully assess needs to make situations equitable instead of equal? For example, it's obvious that people are different heights, but there are times that it is not obvious or you may be assuming. So how do you respectfully assess needs to make situations equitable instead of equal?
It's a really great question. I ask it one more time because I'm going to share a quick analogy with you, and then I want you to ask the question again because it triggers something for me, right? So sure. My organization had done an overhaul of corporate office, and I'm 6'4". I think you saw in that picture, I'm kind of a tall gentleman. I go to corporate. I went to get coffee, which I rarely drink, but it's in Dallas. So I'm like, man, I need to catch up with the time zone. So I get coffee, and as I'm doing the coffee, I'm like, this is awesome. The counter heights, our CEO, I think is like 6'5" or 6'6", right? So these countertops were awesome. For me specifically, like in my house or wherever I am, I have to get them custom made so that they're raised up and I'm not bending over. I was like, this, it just felt different to not have to bend over, right? So I did the coffee, I'm walking out. And as I'm walking out, I was super kind of elated, like, high countertops. And in my mind, I'm thinking, if someone were in a wheelchair that came into that, they would not have access. So as I'm excited about this privilege, this newfound privilege that I just got, that the countertops are my waist height, I had missed the opportunity to be an ally, right? And it took me like 2 hours. I was like, man, you noticed that the countertop, right? And everybody was super excited. And I thought about us. There are folks who that would be an extreme burden for these countertops to be so high. And I actually went to our leadership and said, hey, is there an opportunity? Maybe we've got some tabletops in there, maybe drop some tabletops, add some options for, condiments for coffee, maybe a little bit lower. But I mean, it's awesome for me, but I think there's some people that may be challenged by it. So that's what resonated when you read that to me. So in this work, we have to call out ourselves. We have to. So I've got to make the unknown known. So ask the question again, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, and I think it's about how do you respectfully assess needs to make situations equitable instead of equal. And what came to mind for me is I remember being in school and being annoyed that people got extra time to take exams, not understanding that that extra time was the time that they needed to complete what I could complete in 60 minutes, right? So how do you ensure that people have the resources that they need to be equitable versus just the equality, everybody gets the same amount of time to take a test?
I think intentionality and being transparent, right? Part of leadership, transparency, vulnerability, those are two of the four pillars that I have. I think being transparent about what you're looking to do, right? For me, that resonates for me because my brother's dyslexic. So he would have been one who needed that time. Or he may have needed to actually take a verbal quiz. So he may have had to go it's an hour-long quiz. He may have had to go the first half hour doing it written, and then the next 45 minutes potentially doing verbally, right? So I think transparency is important, right? Saying that this is not something extra or free that they get, or if you need the time, right? This is not divisive, but in this situation, in order for folks to show that they have received and been able to implement the same data that you have, we have to make space for them. And it has to be safe space for them. And they can't be pushed into another room. You know what I mean? Like it has to be transparent and you have to be intentional about it, but share.
Yeah, I think this goes back to what you were saying about that trusting relationship where feedback goes two ways, where you can ask employees what your feedback is and employees can share with you what the feedback is.
Absolutely.
Well, we just have 2 minutes left. I want to make sure that Javon, you share the information about the stretch sessions, and then I have a little announcement about Global Running Day. So stretch sessions so that you can continue this conversation.
Yes, so we'll have stretch sessions, I believe on the 26th and 31st, is that correct?
That is correct, you got it.
Yes, so we'll have stress. So please bring anything that you're working on in these stress sessions, any questions that you have, any opportunities for awareness, knowledge, skills, awareness, any of that, let's bring that in there. We're gonna have some really great conversations on this. We can get deeper into race relations and racism if you like, but really what are we working on? What's topical, what's important to you all? So that'll be happening on the 26th and the 31st. And then our next session is sustaining an inclusive workforce. So once you attract this talent, what are you now going to do to retain the talent? What are you now going to do to create an environment where that talent may thrive?
Awesome. I just saw this great note. I saw a TikTok about a professor who, whenever he got an accommodation request, he just made it class policy. Very cool.
That's it.
All right, so the stretch sessions that Javon mentioned, another thing that I want to say quickly is Global Running Day is coming up. We are excited because we are doing a, sorry, now my son is talking. RIDC is celebrating by launching an industry-wide campaign that's centering racial equity. So the goal here is to center folks who maybe historically, presently do not see themselves as a runner, center their experiences on Global Running Day. If you are interested in participating in that, you can shoot an email to hello@runningdiversity.com. We've already got 10 brands who are committing to participating in some way. And there will also be a fundraising component of that. We will have limited, there'll be a fundraising component to Global Running Day, separate from that campaign. But we have some awesome socks that we will be selling for donations to sustain the work that we're doing. So we hope that you'll participate in Global Running Day. We will see you at the stretch sessions. And we thank you for being part of this community. Thank you so much, Devon, for your time.
Thank you. Be well.
Bye-bye, everybody.